Can you have a conversation with a socialist? That's a tough one. Since socialism is driven entirely by emotion, as well as sometimes emotions masquerading as facts, it's not usually, in my opinion, a productive use of time to try to engage a socialist in rational, ideological conversation. While this tactic could theoretically be useful in a very small percentage of the cases, I personally don't think it's worth the time or energy. I'll touch on some of the things I do think are worthwhile later. The main problem is, you see, having a rational conversation is tough to do without reason, even though it is clearly the singular quality that has allowed our species to prosper here on Earth. Far too often, humans are not rational creatures. You see this frequently in many aspects of human behavior. One obvious one is gambling. You drive up to Las Vegas and you see right there with your own eyes, throughout the city, the wealth that has been transferred from gullible customers to obliging casino owners, and yet people go there thinking they will be the ones to beat the system. The casino operators literally provide publicly the statistical proof that most people will lose, and yet they just keep on coming. Against this backdrop of irrationality, it's almost amazing that there are any rational social systems out there at all. Human irrationality is the one trait that keeps the zombie philosophy of socialism coming back from the dead over and over again. And I've learned over the course of years that you can't argue with a zombie. In any attempt to do so, pretty soon you get to the point of something like this. Socialist China is taking over the world, hooray! Yeah, China's come a long way because Deng Xiaoping embraced capitalist policies back in the 80s. Yet many Chinese were lifted out of poverty. Great accomplishment. Right, because they're socialists. Socialists who embraced capitalism. Yeah, but they're socialists. You can see where this eventually ends up. Reality-based conversations are not these folks' strong suit. Most people who have become socialists have already crashed through headlong so many obvious logical checkpoints that they are too far gone to reach. The exception, I think, may be the very young or grossly uninformed who are so blissfully ignorant that they have no idea of the implications of the philosophy they are espousing. I actually had one commenter here recently provide a long explanation about her thoughts on capitalism versus socialism, concluding with the statement, "But my heart leads me towards socialism." Now, I usually don't reply to comments this vacuous, but in this case, I made an exception. I briefly pointed out the fact that the only way to implement the compassion of socialism was to imprison non-socialists, which most socialists are just fine with, by the way, by claiming that free association and voluntary work contracts are actually violence. They can now justify imprisoning anyone who creates an organization that doesn't follow their very specific and onerous rules. Very evolved. Anyway, while I'm quite sure this fact did not change the commenter's mind, I got the distinct impression that they had never made the connection between these two facts. Occasionally, it can make sense to point out the obvious to the oblivious, but in the big picture, our efforts are better spent elsewhere. And though it pains me to say it, I think they are better spent getting as far away from these people as we possibly can, both literally and figuratively. One of the reasons socialists are so furious all the time is that they need capitalists to keep their bankrupt philosophy afloat. Without our ingenuity, hard work, and entrepreneurial spirit, they implode every single time, with the speed of the implosion directly proportional to the speed at which they lose our support. This is why they're doing absolutely everything they can to keep us tethered to their primitive, bloated machines, to keep them running. And we need to take all responsible steps to free ourselves from this bondage. Now, every capitalist will have to decide for themselves what they consider to be reasonable steps, but our direction should be clear. Any government, company, organization of any kind or individual trying to either overtly or covertly move us towards socialist policies is our enemy and should be non-violently opposed with all our strength and vigor. Let California and New York and Hollywood and Silicon Valley stand on their own 2 feet and reap the full consequences of their coercive and destructive policies. You can expect more rage from them and more violence. That is, after all, their solution to all the world's problems. Best for us to be as far away as possible when the brittle social structures they've created for themselves finally come crashing down.